So we're going to have a look at another 1A 5-marker. And this is from a previous exam paper. So the question is using material from the item, it always says from the item, and elsewhere, explain the full meaning of the term representative sample. So the first thing I'm going to do is read the item. Much social research about young people is focused on those who are causing problems for society. Nothing about representative sample in there. There is a danger that these people can be taken as a representation of all young people in the UK. Okay, so media reporting. There's a danger that it's taking as a representation of all young people in the UK. So it's hinting there. There's a hint there at generalizability. The ability to make a claim based on only studying a small group. So it's hinting there about generalizability, that there's a danger that people who are sampled, or there's a very small sample, can be taken as a representation of all young people. So it's hinting there at generalizability. A research organisation carried out an online survey. Online survey. Surveys are quantitative. Well, provided that the questions are closed. So surveys generally are quantitative. When the questions are closed. And the fact that it was 1,000 people suggests that the questions are closed. As they're quick to complete. Quantitative, because they have closed questions. Well, there's 1,000 people that have taken part, which suggests the questions are closed because they're so quick to complete. So they're probably making a hint, well, they are, I think, making a hint that actually with 1,000 people, the questions are likely to be closed, they're quick to complete, so the sample can be larger. So it's definitely quantitative, even though they haven't said it, because there's 1,000 people. A sample that large must have a method which is closed questions to have that many respondents, because it's so quick to complete. Claimed to be a representative sample of young people and included an equal number of males and females. So it is representative. As it accounts for differences in terms of gender. So the argument is actually it is representative because there's an equal number of males and females taking part, so they can account for differences of gender. Content analysis of media stories found that 71% of news-related material was negative, and 33% of news stories about young people refer to crime. The analysis of secondary data showed that young people are represented in a negative light. That secondary data bit there is to help draw an item for the 20, so that's not going to help us here. Okay, it's a 5-marker 1A, so I start with a definition. Okay, a representative sample is when the group being researched is typical of the target population. Representative samples when the group being researched is typical of the target population. Is the sample the same as wider society? Does it represent or account for all of the differences that are in our population? Gender, ethnicity, class, nationality, sexual orientation. Does the sample being researched, is it typical or the same as the population, as the target population? For a sample, to be representative, it must reflect the characteristics of the population in terms of class, gender, and ethnicity. For it to be representative, it must reflect the characteristics of the population in terms of class, gender, and ethnicity. That's a definition. Quite a long one, but that's, I'd argue, is the definition mark. If a sample is representative, and can account for key differences, the researcher is likely to be able to generalize or apply their results. So able to generalize, apply, or make a claim with their results. It's a little better. If a sample is representative, so can take account of key differences, the researcher is likely to be able to generalize or apply, so generalize or apply and make a claim with their results. To the target population. Definition, it is when it's typical of the population, it represents in terms of class, gender, and ethnicity. If the sample is representative, e.g. it can account, you are more likely to be able to generalize or apply those results and make a claim to your target population. 16 to 19-year-olds are much more likely to engage in this. So I can make that claim because I studied 16 to 19-year-olds, the sample was large enough, and I had differences in terms of class, gender, ethnicity. That's what makes you able to make a claim or apply your results. Quantitative methods, like questionnaires and cross-sectional surveys, longitudinal surveys, not quantitative. Quantitative methods like questionnaires and cross-sectional surveys are more likely to be representative. As closed questions make it quick to complete. So the researcher can have larger samples, can account for differences in groups. Quantitative methods like questionnaires and cross-sectional surveys are more likely to be representative, as closed questions make it quick to complete. The researcher can generate larger samples and so can account for differences in those groups, or account for differences based on class, gender, and ethnicity. Questionnaires and cross-sectional surveys are more likely to be representative, as closed questions make it quick to complete. The researcher can access larger samples and can account for differences based on class, gender, and ethnicity. Positivists seek large representative samples as they are a macro approach and seek to establish patterns and trends within society. Representative samples are needed to establish these trends. Definition. It's when your sample is typical or can account and represent key differences. So, for example, when particularly female rappers talk about, quite a lot of the rap community or hip hop community talk about representation, what they're saying is, I'm here trying to represent a group that's been marginalized or not been included. So, for example, particularly women of color often say, well, I'm representing what it's like to be a woman of color within society. Because you may be a man of color, but you don't experience sexism in the same way that a woman does. So when we represent, we have to include groups who experience huge differences based on their class or their gender or their ethnicity, or all three. Definition. Generalize, it's representative, it's much more likely to be generalizable. Quantitative methods are more representative because the samples are much larger. Positivists seek to have those large representative samples because that's what they need to establish key patterns and trends. So that's 4 marks. The 5th mark comes from the item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that to you to pull out from the item. You might want to consider, as I've said, males and females are arguably being represented here. So in the item, we could maybe pull on that. We can also note that link into our quantitative methods being more representative here. I would note, though, again, that the 1,000 people again, so 1,000 people, it's a large representative samples, which is probably why they've got such a high response rate. But I've given you the 4 marks there to pull those out. I'd like you to have a go at using the item, pulling from it, to make that 5th mark. Okay. That's representative sample. Any questions or any issues, do let me know.